production program and their sponsorship of international terrorism. And so I think it was quite right to do that work. Otherwise, we would be dealing with an even worse situation today.
Another embarrassing moment, a hero's welcome home for the Libyan man convicted of involvement in the Lockerbie bombing. The British say the release of Abdelbasset El-Magrahi was a strictly legal matter, with no connection to the growing interests of its oil companies in Libya.
People believe that there are large reserves still to be untapped in Libya, and big companies like BP and Shell look for big wins. So at that level, it would be very good for Shell, it would be very good for BP after their terrible year to get a big win in the Libyan desert. But basically, yes, the British matter in Libya. The British are big in oil and gas, and that's been linked into also a whole network of political and economic relations.
Britain is a major arms exporter. Its weapon sales to Libya are worth millions rather than billions, but its companies have been lobbying for bigger deals. The British government has cancelled 8 arms export licenses to Libya and says it's reviewing several others. This is because of concerns that British weapons could be used against Libyan protesters. Nonetheless, there are still many awkward questions here about the scale of commercial links between Britain and Libya.
The UK has sold everything from sniper rifles to tear gas to crowd control ammunition. And so these are clearly the kind of weapons we see on the ground being used against protesters.
They believe change back home is coming. But for Britain, there is now uncomfortable scrutiny on how this country does business and with whom. Barnaby Phillips, Al Jazeera, London.
Well, another European country that does a lot of business with Libya is Italy. And now an Italian government source says the country has enough oil to last 90 days and enough gas to last just 30 days. That comes as gas flows to Italy from Libya are slowing because of the turmoil in the North African country. Well, Al Jazeera's Harry Smith is in Rome for us. Harry, this must be quite worrying for the Italian people if it's confirmed. 90 days for oil, 30 days for gas.
Well, there's been no official word from the Italian government, but as you said, one news agency based here in Rome is quoting an official energy source as saying that it is indeed a worrying situation. They are concerned, however. You mentioned that they do have 90 days supply. Now, that will be fine if this crisis doesn't last for that long, but of course nobody here knows. They're obviously having to look at contingency plans. It's also, however, worth pointing out that Italy gets just 25% of its oil from Libya and only 10% of its gas. Now, the problem appears to be, the biggest problem appears to be a pipeline called the Green Stream pipeline, which connects Libya with Italy and through which Libya pushes natural gas. Now, that's slowed down, I'm told, in the last few days, and at least one marine oil terminal has stopped supplying Italy altogether. Now, it's worrying not just for Italy, but for the rest of Europe, because although Italy is by far Libya's biggest customer, taking something like 30% of its output, Europe as a whole takes around 70% of Libyan output. So it's a problem for the Libyan oil industry as well, unless this crisis can be resolved.
Harry, I guess because of those links, it took Silvio Berlusconi quite a long time to condemn the violence in Libya. He did do that on Monday night, though. He condemned that violence. Have we heard anything else from the government about what they plan to do or not do in relation to the crisis in Libya?
Remarkably little, and if you go around the streets, if you talk to Libyan exiles, the one thing they want from the Italian government, the one thing they want from Berlusconi is some stronger condemnation. They believe that the Italian government, Berlusconi in particular, has tied himself far too closely to the Libyan leader, Colonel Gaddafi, and that they simply cannot afford to come out now and condemn him. They're waiting on the sidelines to see which way this is going to go, and the Italians are guessing like the rest of the world. Nobody quite knows how long this crisis will go on, and nobody quite knows how it will end up.
Waiting on the sidelines does seem to be what a lot of these governments are doing. Harry Smith with the latest from Rome. Thank you. And Germany has become the latest country to condemn the violent crackdown in Libya. Germany's foreign minister demanded sanctions against Gaddafi's regime if the violence doesn't stop immediately. Guido Westerwelle also described the situation as dramatic and dangerous. Germany is sending 2 military planes to evacuate citizens and says any opportunity Germans have to leave themselves should be taken. Let's go to France, where Colonel Gaddafi's former head of protocol has insisted the Libyan leader will not step down despite the uprising. Nouri al-Mismari also warned that a bloody fight is likely if the unrest continues. It comes as France is sending 3 passenger planes to Tripoli to repatriate its citizens. Well, at least one weapons expert estimates the potential cost to Russia of the uprisings in Africa and the Middle East could top $10 billion. Last year, the Russian Federation agreed to sell $1.8 billion worth of arms to Libya alone. AlJazeera's Niamh Barker has the story from Moscow.
Like many Western countries, Russia has been keen to establish a foothold in Libya ever since the country opened up to foreign investment. Moscow has been constructing a $3.5 billion high-speed rail link in the country, due to be completed sometime next year. And only last week, Russia signed a joint agreement between the nation's energy giant Gazprom and the Italian energy firm Eni to develop the Elephant oil field in the south of Libya. But as news of the violence in the country reaches Russia, Moscow has asked for all of its foreign specialists to leave the country and urged Gaddafi to end the bloodshed. And the Libyan defense minister traveled here to Moscow to sign a major arms deal worth $1.8 billion. According to a diplomatic military source, the deal included the sale of heavy weaponry, tanks and fighter jets. Before sanctions were imposed on Libya, the country used to be the biggest buyer of Russian armaments in the second half of the 20th century, something the Kremlin hoped Gaddafi would be once again. But now Gaddafi is using Russian-made weapons to kill his own people. As for the country's relationship with Gaddafi, well, at least one Russian nationalist politician, Vladimir Zhirinovsky, has told Gaddafi that he's free to come and settle here in Russia. The Kremlin, though, have remained quiet, undoubtedly watching developments in Libya very closely.
Niamh Barker with the latest there from Moscow. And that is the European reaction to the events in Libya. Now let's go back to Shuli in Doha.
Barbara, thanks very much indeed for that. Well, we're waiting to hear from Muammar Gaddafi, who is due to appear on Libyan state television. These are pictures being broadcast out of Tripoli by Libyan state television, as you can see, showing lots of supporters of Gaddafi, all clapping, waving their arms, waving pictures of Gaddafi around, all waiting to hear their leader address them. And we'll bring you that as and when it happens. We're expecting that quite shortly. OK, let's get some reaction from inside Libya now. Qassem Najjar is a former Libyan Air Force colonel. He's resigned, but he resigned before the uprising. He joins me now from Brussels. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Can you tell us, first of all, why you resigned?
I did not resign.
Oh, I do apologise. My information is wrong. OK, so can you tell me what
pressures